Comic conventions are huge business now, probably bigger than they've ever been at this point. And it's easy to see why, with most becoming big tent popular culture conventions with movie stars, anime voice actors, cosplay, gaming. There's something for just about everyone. Except, it seems, for people that actually read and buy comics. But what's killing the comics part of Comic-Cons? Some people will tell you that it's going out of style. Some people will tell you that it's the waning popularity of superhero films. Some people will tell you it's wokeness or declining Western comic sales. Some other nonsense, but it's really something so much more simple, so much older, more definable, and much more obvious. It's greed. Greed is killing Comic-Cons, and it's growing them into something else that's also going to get killed by greed. Stick around. I'm Dan Umpton, and this is the Doomcast. First off, do me a favor, hit subscribe and the bell. I make about one of these videos a week. They are all great, so please don't miss even one. Comic-Cons are the stuff of dreams. Sweaty, often confusing, sometimes expensive, sometimes incredibly fulfilling dreams. They are like gun shows or trade shows for people who have never had sex in high school. Well, they were at one time. It's become vastly more mainstream and less of a refuge for undateable losers with very strong opinions on Namor, guilty as charged. But they now see people, some of whom have actually touched or are themselves hot women, at their doors. Now, in the 90s and 2000s, when I came up, they were mostly comic book centric. You'd go to a hotel convention hall or a library or a state fair building. You'd walk around all day buying cheap comics, new ash cans from up-and-coming creators, getting free signatures from your favorite writers or artists that were paid to be there, with a smattering of cosplay of varying quality. But flash forward 20 years and things have changed vastly. For one thing, cosplay has greatly improved, where you could only find a few booths selling VHSs of subtitled anime. Anime with American voice actors is now at least an equal, if not bigger, draw than comic guests. Wrestlers, people from TV shows from 10 to 30 years ago, or even recent ones, are there all over the place. Planet Comic-Con recently had the cast from Evil, and also Helen Hunt from Mad About You and Twister. There was also boba tea and chocolate-covered strawberries. You can find just about anything there now. Also, don't get me wrong, more people isn't entirely a bad thing. Broader appeal is not a bad thing at all either. And KC's Planet Comic-Con is probably one of the most accessible comic conventions in the country, and it's always a lot of fun, not giving them a hard time at all. Being able to walk a convention floor with a craft beer and a gourmet panini while checking out costumes and meeting somebody from the Lord of the Rings cast is definitely very cool. But what has happened to comic books? Comics stubbornly do what they've always done and done well, and what I'm about to do in a little bit, which is gatekeep. Comic conventions, the small ones, were always for finding comics. New comics, cheap comics, whatever. Go through a dollar bin or something like that. Some kind of treasure of value, some personal grail or unique book here or there. The bigger ones, independent creators would bring their own best work, new art, or whole comics in efforts to try and get their work recognized by independent publishers, maybe Marvel or DC, to try and pick them up. And you could still find a lot of comics. And established creators might actually sign a book, or 2, or 3, or 10 for free. Now, while that's still mostly true, a lot has fallen by the wayside. Small cons have some books at relatively decent prices. The bigger ones, held in massive convention halls, often have far less. What they do have is often frustratingly overpriced. For example, at a con I was recently at, I saw a copy of New Mutants 98 being sold by a comic book store. They had a booth there. Now that copy looked perfect. Unslabbed would likely grade at 9.8. Or let's assume that it would in this case. What would you pay for that? Well, you probably have a number in mind if you actually know comics. What did they want for it? $600. That's roughly double the actual value of that book itself, even in the best condition and unslabbed. I bought a copy which graded at 9 recently. For about $200 2 years ago, which I'd consider a pretty damn good deal. It's not a super rare book. It's just well sought after. Anyway, $600 is crazy. They wanted $1,200 for an Uncanny X-Men 101, $700 for an Amazing Spider-Man 300, so on and so forth. Prices all being roughly double or more than what that actual book is truly worth, and what any person who is really looking for that book is probably interested in paying. Now, for those wondering, I did try to haggle and see what they'd actually take in cash. Ultimately, we didn't really get anywhere, and I noticed that several vendors also did the same. It's not a book that I needed a copy of, but I was genuinely curious what he would actually take. Why, I wondered, would a vendor paying for a booth of great size not try to price books at least at a reasonable markup, but still movable price, right? Don't you need revenue more than you need stock? The answer might be no, possibly. If they can move one book at an insanely inflated price to somebody stupid, they've made the cost of their booth back at least. What does a booth cost? Like, probably $2,000 at a major con, I would think. Maybe $1,000 at a smaller to mid-size con, like where I was at. It's still crazy because the vast majority of people buying comics of value, those customers already know precisely what that book is probably going to cost, right? They know what the book that they're seeking is worth. At least they know what is way too much, right? It's not to say that there aren't fair dealers. There are. But it's like the housing market, though, right now. Somebody with more money, the equivalent of private equity, will buy copies of books at regular prices and then resell them for insane values at comic conventions. As a result, the cost of a table for a comic book dealer at a major Comic-Con goes up and up and up, pricing fair and regular dealers out of being able to do business there, and further allowing those prices for those comics to keep going up and up and up in notional value. I genuinely think that there's a comics price correction probably coming because of the waning popularity of superhero film, and also because of just general inflation and the fact that people don't have as much disposable income. But that's another video in and of itself entirely. Now, that aside, a new thing that I did notice pervasively since COVID is no creators do free signatures, or at least very few of them. Now, as much as I truly want to meet and thank these folks, I actually understand this. They need to eat. Most of these creators are not paid super handsomely to write or draw comic books, bottom line. Couple that with the cost of going to these conventions that they, as a rule, are paying to be there more often than not. Some people may not sell comics or trades or stickers or buttons or anything else in the quantities necessary to keep going and justify the cost of being at the convention to begin with. Meanwhile, the con went from being a $20 day pass 6 years ago to being a $60 day pass today. People coming to booths are squeezed. They're probably not spending as much money anyway, and unfortunately a lot of these writers and artists have a choice. Charge for signatures to make sure that you actually make your bottom line, or don't go to that Comic-Con. Unfortunately, very few of them are doing the third thing, which is go to cons and don't charge as much for signatures, but notably some like Chip Zdarsky or others will sign personalized books for nothing up to a certain point. Maybe they'll at least sign one for free, very frequently, but a lot are charging $10 a signature per books. Some more for graded books, which is, I get it, but it's pretty damn expensive. But somebody figured it out. All the movie stars are charging $40 for an autograph, $60 for an autograph, $80 for an autograph. Why shouldn't they charge $10? A lot of other writers and artists are doing the latter. Especially with the political climate in the United States, many writers or artists are from outside of the United States. So given circumstances, they may not decide to come to the US for a convention if they, for example, fear not being able to get home. Even then, coming to, setting up, eating at, sleeping at, and getting home from a convention is very expensive, even for people that live in the United States. For creators, so many of the creators of so many top books from the big two are simply showing out at fewer and fewer conventions every year. And the simplest solution here is just paying those creators to be there, or comping most of that cost for them. That is, if you want comic creators there. Of course, greed, in this case, is the same problem with every other thing in America. Most conventions are ultimately owned by a large private equity firm or a large publishing company or something like that with a desire for profit over product, and the trend as of late has been to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze that product until there's nothing left. That's what greed does. That's what private equity does. That's true for corporations, people who buy up housing, office space, restaurants, and of course comic conventions as well. That's not different. The simple solution for all of these things is the people at the very top profiting just a little bit less for sustainable growth and keeping fandom and housing and food and restaurants all affordable, accessible, and growing so that they have a business in the future. Well, thanks everybody for watching. This has been the Doomcast. We'll see you again next week. Peace.